Hey everyone, so I just start the live, always testing the audio. I just need a minute to see if the audio will arrive just fine. 1 minute. Yeah, let me see. I have to see the feedback. I have to hear the feedback. Yeah, I think just fine. Yeah, it's fine. Yes, it's fine. It's fine. Yep, it's fine. So, hey everyone, I'm very glad to be here again. This is the second live that you do on this podcast, Scientists Free from Religion. And today you have a very special guest, Dr. Kara, Richard Kara. He is well known and he's very famous on YouTube for being one of those guys that does not believe that Jesus Christ exists. People call him a mysticist. Basically, he thinks that Jesus is a myth, but not just think. He has all the proof. He has a book called "Proving History." It's not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of not a matter of belief. It's not a matter of opinion. But I was very glad that I came to me that Richard Carey was sometime reading my blog, Scientists Free from Religion. Then he commented on a post about Sam Harris and Francis Collins. Basically, the post was about the debate between was Rich Dawkins versus Francis Collins, and the Kara bring a perspective that I invite him. Maybe you could do a live. You could explain better what we're doing. I was very surprised to know, as I was preparing for this conversation, that Dr. Kara, Mr. Kara has a paper from 2011. So he has been on this road for as long as Sam Harris. One of the topic of the conversation could be how come Sam Harris became the guy of he's very famous, Dr. Richard Carey, because of the historicity of Jesus. He has a different approach. When I was studying about the Bible, I saw one of his talk, Did Jesus Exist? And I was very surprised because he was a mathematical approach. So since I promised him that I will not take too much of his time, I will not talk too much. I will give him the space. I will just bring him for the studio. So welcome, Dr. Carey.
Yeah. Glad to be here.
So today we have a very big challenge because when you talk about atheism, in the because when it comes to the conflict between science and the religion, science and religion, we have all this intelligent design, you have all this creationists, but the fight, the science has a chance to win. But when it comes to morality, it's become like a religion or is a kind of you don't see option. It's a bottleneck when you come to morality. So it was very nice to see your work.
I've said that again.
It was very nice to see that you working with
Oh yeah,
morality.
you had mentioned at the top that I'd been doing this as long as Sam Harris. That's literally true. My first articulation of the theory that I advance now under peer review was in 2005, actually. So my book, Sense of Goodness Without God, came out right before his first book, or around the same time as his
So
first book.
just to check, what's the name of the book that you talk about morality?
Yeah, Sense and Goodness Without God. And folks who follow the website that's on my screen here, you can find links to all of my books there and my blog and whatever else you're interested in. But yeah, that was my first book, and it articulated what I call the goal theory of moral value, and then argued with philosophers and defended it over years and years. And then the first peer-reviewed version of it was in 2011, as you mentioned, in The End of Christianity. And so it's a
Yes,
chapter of
yes.
it's an anthology by John Loftus. John Loftus's anthologies are great. Like they're still excellent collections of things. And then he did three. He's done more than three, but I was in three, the first three of them, and and I have one or two chapters in all of them. But the second one, which was The End of Christianity, I had the chapter in there, like the scientific basis of moral values. And that was around the same time that Harris came out with The Moral Landscape. And I even cited in there, even though I think his presentation of it is flawed philosophically. I think he's missing a key piece of how to do it correctly. And I think you and I were discussing how he does fail at that when he's discussing it with Collins. And we might talk about that, like how he's getting one piece wrong. And if you fix that piece, we'd be better off, and we can make some progress on this. So yeah, that's the back. And then just recently, I can't remember the date, 2020, 2021. I don't remember the exact year it came out. Oh wait, I have it right here. My most recent defense of this, which was, it was 2025. Okay, yeah. So in the journal Religions, I published the article. The title is Objective Moral Facts Exist in All Possible Universes. And that's open source. So if people go search that title online, they'll find the journal Religions.
It's on the description of the video.
Yeah, and it's open source, so people can go and read it. There's no paywall for it, which I'm really grateful for, because that's, I think, probably my best presentation of it, with all the breadcrumbs that you need to follow, like the sources that I cite that you can follow to learn more about every little point in there. And it's the most formally structured one, where it's really hard to argue against the point being made. So yeah, that's the backstory, how we got here.
Before we go to the topic, I was wondering how come you are very famous because of the myth of Jesus, because you are one of this guy that not believe that Jesus exists. But somehow some Harris became the guy. At least I'm also responsible. Before you talk to me, I didn't know that you were working with morality. I thought it was something new.
Yeah.
But then how come Sam Harris became the guy of morality? Do you have any idea?
Well, I mean, so there's a principle called economic lock-in, which is, and also first mover. So he was the most famous. And so once you've got all the oxygen, you keep all the oxygen, right? So like more people know about what he publishes and stuff. And so more people are talking about what he publishes. And they're not thinking to check, like, are there other philosophers who've published on the same topic, and have they published actual peer-reviewed philosophy, which Harris has not done. He doesn't publish peer-reviewed philosophy. He doesn't doing like real academic philosophy. He just kind of like did a pop market book essentially. But since people don't think to check, it's like, someone else done this, have they done it better, or whatever, people don't check. And so basically a lot of philosophers like me just get ignored generally, and the famous people stay famous and everybody knows about what they write. And that's just the way it just always works. The lesser known people don't read their work unless they literally know to go look for it.
I think I had just one moment. I had just one problem with the. Can you hear me?
Yes, I saw you freeze just briefly, but you look all right.
Okay.
I don't think that's
Okay. So maybe we can start by separating the side, because in one side you have at least how I separate, because I did a lot of research on your before this live. I read your paper, I saw some of your work, so I'm still learning. So I would say that on one side you have Francis Collins, which is basically a Christian, devout Christian. He's a atheist.
Yeah.
On the other side, you have, I will put you and Sam Harris, but later we are going to separate you and Sam Harris. Basically, you and Sam Harris seems to agree that we need a science of morality. That it seems that both of you agree that science can answer morality. What's different between the approach that you follow, you are going to have the opportunity to explore it, is how you do it. So do you agree with me that you and Sam Harris basically are talking the same thing, but you just change how you do the approach? Do you agree with me?
Yeah. In fact, I would break the Harris and me, our side, I would break it down, and there's two scientific problems to solve. Harris is almost entirely focused on one of them, where I'm pointing out that we need to focus on both. And the one that Harris gets right, which is that once you decide what the goal is, like what is the goal of morality, right? Like Then answering the question of what best achieves that goal is straightforward science. I mean, it's the same as anything. Like once you've decided the goal of surgery or building a bridge or anything, once you've decided the goal of something, then science can straightforwardly figure out empirically what is the best way to get that. And that's how we do like economics, sociology, political science, like a lot of the what is the best or worst way of doing a thing. That is totally science's domain. That's not even controversial to say. But where Harris gets criticized, and I've written about how Harris has gotten criticized for his view, is that the part of deciding what the goals are, that's the part that he kind of hand waves through a lot, where he doesn't talk about how would we empirically determine that, right? So, and he seems to think that it's not even a subject of empirical inquiry. He's kind of waffled about this. Whereas I've actually looked into like the psychology and the game theory of it and show that there's actually correct ways to get at this question is what actually should the goal be and how do you cascade? How do you order your values empirically? And there is a way to do that. Now that is harder because it requires getting at what it is that people would want when they are fully informed and reasoning without fallacy, right? So you can't just ask people because lots of people are reasoning badly or they're ignorant of things or have misinformation. So what people believe is often incongruous with what the truth would be. So trying to figure out like who is perfectly rational and informed and then figure out what they would say. And this gets close to like what traditionally in philosophy been called ideal agent theory, where the moral truth is what an ideal moral agent would do. And what I'm doing is I'm saying an ideal moral agent is an agent who is perfectly rational and fully informed. And this really follows out of like, if you want to be rational, there is really only one correct way to behave for a rational agent. And that is then determinable empirically. But it still has to be done, right? So like we don't really have a branch of science that's doing this yet. So we have to look at, well, what has game theory done? What has psychology done? What has sociology done? What do we know from economics and political science? And you have to kind of cobble it together. And we haven't really decisively answered various questions. We have good answers, but they're not like full on, like fully researched, established science yet. Because no one's doing this. No one has a field of prescriptive ethics as a science yet. And that's what Harris and I are arguing for. That's what we both agree, that there needs to be such a thing. And we're doing, as philosophers, we're doing our best with the data that's available now. But we could have better data now that we know what we're looking for, right? And like I mentioned to people, you can check the article that I go into exactly what I'm talking about, why this is the case. And then there's a lot of citations in there to articles and books, some of mine and some other people's, that deep dive all of the aspects of this, including like what kind of values are we likely to end up with if we activated this scientific field and it actually did like 10 years of, millions of dollars of research, like what would they most likely end up with? We can kind of make some predictions with what will probably come out of that process. And like any other science, it would keep advancing. And it would be tentative. So it might have conclusions that turn out to be wrong, and then you revise and as you get more information and update and so on, just like every other scientific field. So that's the basic idea, I think. And it's the one difference between me and Harris is the focus on how do we empirically determine the goal? What is it that you really want most out of life? What do you really want most out of life? That is a question. It's hard to answer, but it does have an empirically true answer, and we can get at it. We have scientific tools for it. And some work in science has been done on this, and I cite some of those examples in my paper.
Well, I don't know if you agree. I was think about that. I thought to ask you about that as I was prepared for this live. I'm from biomathematics. I do have engineering in the applied mathematics background. So I spent most of my time working with optimization. So when I see the work of Sam Harris, when he's talk about the moral landscape, I think about a function with several peaks and valleys, like misery and the good life, the good society. I see Harris as someone telling me that there is this landscape. The landscape exists. You are telling me that how to calculate the gradient. The gradient is how you.
Yeah. Actually, I think he might be right about the landscape theory. So for people who want to understand landscape theory, this I think is his biggest contribution that I think is being overlooked by philosophy they should pay more attention to. Because I'm pretty sure he's right about this, which is that if you were to map all possible moral systems against their outcomes, like they would make society worse or they make society better, and you have the landscape, and there would be peaks of really successful moral things, and there would be gradual improvement towards those peaks, so like better and better, you have moral progress. And then valleys, which would be the failed moral systems, the terrible ones, or peaks that are lower than other peaks, so there's better moral systems. But the problem, of course, is that they might be incommensurate. So there might be multiple true moral systems, but you can only have to pick one. And the example that I always give is for people who know about driving in England versus America. In England, you drive on the left. In America, you drive on the right. And this changes all the other traffic laws that like whether you can right turn without a signal and so kinds of things. Just all those particular rules. Now, both systems work perfectly well, so you can't say one system is better than the other. But you do have to pick one because all other systems suck, right? All other systems increase the rate of accidents and traffic jams and all of the other things like that. So these are two peaks on a landscape of worse traffic systems and gradually better traffic systems leading up to the peaks of these. But there's no way to merge them, right? You have to pick one of the two peaks, but they're both just as good. So there's no truth of the matter as to which you should pick. There's only a truth of the matter that you need to pick one and you need to get to the peak, the ideal traffic system within that one peak in the landscape. And so you have a landscape of traffic systems, and that's how it works. And Harris is proposing that morality is like this, that we have these incommensurate peaks. They're both equally good. There might be more than two. And they're because they're hills, there's moral systems that fall short of them, but are on a progress path toward them. And so I think that might be right. I think ultimately, like, are there incommensurate, equally good moral systems is a question that we haven't answered yet empirically. But I think the principle is sound based on the traffic system analogy. And you could probably pick other analogies. There's different ways to do things that are equally good, but you do have to pick one or the other. All the other methods are bad or worse, right? So that part, and he named the book after that, The Landscape. So moral landscapes, landscape theory. I think he's right about that. And I think he would agree with me that once you've picked the goal, how to get the true best way to achieve that goal is pretty straightforward. Empirically, it's not a problem for science. And the only part where we disagree is that I think science could actually answer the first part, which is what are the goals? What should the goals be? And it's just a harder scientific problem to answer. And that's the thing that he hasn't dived into as much. And I'm wondering if this explains at all your reaction to his debate with Collins, right? Where he had you had some issues with Harris and how he was interacting with Collins. Maybe
No, in fact, as a matter of fact, I had to rewrite the story because I was too tough on Harris. I'm not that SD on Harris. It was a misunderstanding. I mean, but I'm very tough in Collins. For me, the idea of Collins that you have I don't know if you saw the debate but Collins basically says that there is Collins basically says there is a kind of universal morality that he wants to study. He wants to find this universal morality. But all the example that he gives a Christian country. If you are in a country that has Christianity as base, so of course people have a common morality. It's obvious. It's basic science. It's biased data.
This kind of goes back even to C.S. Lewis for people who are familiar with early 20th century Christian apologetics. But C.S. Lewis, I read his, I had an uncle who was a Christian and said, you got to read C.S. Lewis before you decide to be an atheist or whatever. And so he sent me Mere Christianity, which was an anthology that has Mere Christianity as one of the chapters and has a few other chapters. And I read that and I still have it with all the annotations and stuff. But one of the examples that he gave proving that morality is a mystical thing that comes from God and everybody agrees on what it is intuitively is he gave the rule that if you leave your seat, if you pick a seat on a train and you leave your seat to like go to the bathroom or something, that it is immoral to go take your seat, right? Like somehow you have a cosmic, divinely ordained right to your seat. even though it's not on your ticket or anything like that. But it's just understood. We all understand this, right? So, and he was using this as an example of the proof that there's universal morality in all our intuitions all over the world accurately get to the same intuition. And when I read that book, I had already been through the Coast Guard. I'd served in the United States Coast Guard for several years, and including a year at sea. And I distinctly remember that we had exactly the opposite rule. So that we had a lounge that you could had the one television that existed in the thing, and you play tapes on it or whatever. It was the one entertainment lounge we had on the ship. But because of the way the ship's operations worked, if someone got up to leave, it was just understood that you cannot expect anybody to not take your seat, because there's no expectation that you're coming back. No one knows if you're coming back because you have duties or whatever. And so it was our rule, and we talked about it. This is the rule: is that it's the opposite. If you leave your seat, it is completely ethical to take that seat, and the people who leave the seat agree that it's totally ethical to take their seat. And so I had been in a social system where the opposite rule was correct, and it would have been immoral to do it the other way around. And so that immediately I saw that, like, oh my God, he didn't like talk to other cultures or look at other social systems to see that what is the best behavior reflects the system that you're in. And so there's actually an empirical way to work that out based on if the circumstances change, so do the rules. And that was part of the beginning of my realizing that that's where morality comes from, is the rational response to the circumstances of the world. And this was long, about 10 years before I published Sense and Goodness, which was about 10 years before I started publishing peer-reviewed versions of this theory. So it's something I've been working on for like 20, 30 years, but it's gotten to its perfected form now. But it all began with that sort of realization that the Christians just aren't checking, right? They're just assuming that what their intuitions are is what everybody's intuitions are, and not asking, why are those their intuitions? Like, why is it that C.S. Lewis had this assumption about saving your seat? How did that rule arise? Why does it exist, etc.? Where does it come from? Well, it all comes from humans, like talking and for working out what system they want to live in, and then it goes as a social contract, and so on. And so, yeah, it's not like universal cosmic moral truth. It's just, practical and rational dealing with the social system that you're in. So anyway, that's an example of that, if that makes sense.
Yes, I understood. You are giving an example in which C.S. Lewis gave an example or one type of morality that he thought was universal, and
Yeah.
you said that I have my reality is the opposite, the other way around. So your body's wrong.
Yeah.
So because I want to bring, maybe you have time, I want to bring another thinker to the table, but I'd like to insist a little bit more on Sam Harris.
Yeah.
In my mind, I have two pictures in my mind. I have Sam Harris as a kind of empirical guy. He say that you can find the moral landscape by studying neuroscience, by studying experiment. You can have data. You, on the other hand, you are saying that we can calculate using game theory, using the prisoner dilemma. So I see one as a, let's say, deductive, as a you as a theoretical guy, and Sam Harris as a more empirical guy. I don't know if you follow me.
No. So all good science starts deductively, right? So like you have your theory, and then from that you deduce predictions, and then you go look for the predictions. So to confirm the theory is all empirical, right? So like I can show deductively that moral facts definitely exist to be found, but I cannot deductively arrive at those moral facts. So you have to go looking, right? You have to go interact with the world and gather data. And so Harris is totally right about that. And I make this point too, is that you still have to do the science. And it wouldn't just be game theory. So I use game theory in my article to show that there are only so many social systems that are even logically possible. And we actually can work out what strategy would work best in all of them. So there is a deductive way to get the model, but you would still need to test it, right? So like game theory says this should work, but in proper science, you should still go out and see, is that how it actually works? Like, is our theory correct? And I think so. Harris and I are in agreement on that. Is that you still should check. Another example is that I don't just cite game theory as sort of the foundation for this. I also cite what's called self-consciousness or self-regard psychology. So psychology of self-respect and things like that. Now, psychology is not a sort of deductive mathematical science. Like, it has math, it has deduction, but it's mostly empirical, and it's very difficult because psychology is hard to get at, right? It's very difficult to link psychological states to neural states, and if you're relying on people's self-report, people are very unreliable. Like, they often are bad at communicating what they're feeling or thinking, and even when they're correct in communicating it, what they're feeling or thinking is often wrong. So even about themselves, so like even self-reporting about themselves can be wrong. So psychology is a challenging empirical field, but there are still truths to get at, right? So it's just because it's harder to get at the correct data doesn't mean that the data doesn't exist or that you can't get at it. And I think a lot of like the harder work of a morality of or a science of morality would be getting at that, getting at what is it that you would really prefer in life if you thought differently, if you were acting differently, and so on. And you can't just ask someone that question because they're going to answer with all the false information in their head. They're going to answer because they're reasoning fallaciously. So they're going to have ideas about that aren't correct. So to work out how would they answer that if they were fully informed, if they weren't reasoning fallaciously, that's a harder task. And then to do that for like thousands of people, so you've got a big sample and you can start talking about what is held in common by all humans, that takes work. And I do think like there are people doing that work, and there is some data related to this. I think it could be done much more directly, and much more money could be spent on this, figuring out what actually is the most satisfying life and what qualities does it have that are shared by all people. So like individual people might have differences in terms of what career they want to pursue, or what kind of art they want to fill their life with, or how they want to spend their time. People obviously are going to differ on all of those things. So, but what is held in common among all of those things that is the thing that makes us think life is worth living, and that if we had two choices, if we were looking at two different worlds and two different lives we could live, how do we tell which one is going to end up better for us, that we would agree that if we could talk to our future selves that they would say, yeah, this was the best choice, good one, make that choice. There is an answer to that question, and it is empirically accessible. It's just hard to answer that question. So I do agree with Sam Harris that ultimately you've got to appeal to empirical stuff, but your framework, the sort of predictive model, the hypothesis, the theory, that starts deductive, and that's what he's done too. Like he just didn't make it quite as explicit as I did. I had to make it more explicit because philosophers are only interested in that, really. So like I had to make it airtight for philosophers, and then say, okay, here's the foundation. Now we can go test this with a science that using this model as the sort of research program. And I think at that point, that's where Harris and I are in agreement. The only thing, like I said, that I differ is that I think there's a second wing of that research that needs to be done, whereas he thinks it's just intuitive and there's no science to be done there. And he calls it like the goal is human flourishing. He never really quite parameterized. He doesn't define that like in a scientific way. He doesn't explain how he drives that. Like whatever the definition is, how do you know that's what people want more? Maybe there's something people want more than that. He has some answers to that, but they're very armchairy, very philosophical answers, not empirical scientific answers. Whereas I cite psychologists who actually are asking and trying to work at that, figuring out that problem. And that's what we need to be looking at. We need to ramp that up more so that we understand what is the good life that is translatable to all lives. So it's not that everybody has to act and be exactly the same, but there is a commonality about what makes life good or better or worse for people. And that's the knowledge that we need to seek. And then morality will derive from that. Because then that gives you the goals. Then it's just empirically figuring out what's the best way to achieve the goals. And that's the other half that Harris is pretty good at.
But just to make sure that you get the point, the beef of the issue that people has with some health is the concept of well-being. You say well-being of human, that the goal has to optimize the well-being, and the philosopher does not like it because the word is very is very ill-defined.
Yeah.
It's very hard to define. He claims that the fact that you don't know what is a life does not stop a biologist to work. The fact that you don't know what's a healthy life does not stop a medical doctor to work. He
Yeah.
claimed that philosophy is playing with word. Do you have the same beef with Harris, or your beef is a little bit different with Harris?
So, I've written about this loosely. I've got a book coming out where I'm going to talk more about what the problems are with philosophy. And so Harris he's often sort of basically been flippant about philosophy. Like, he's very insulting, and philosophy is useless and it's not doing anything worthwhile, etc. But then all he does is publish in philosophy. So like, it's kind of a contradictory behavior. And I think his complaints about philosophy are uninformed and exaggerated, but have a kernel of truth. I think there is a problem in academic philosophy where there's no clearly defined idea of what constitutes progress. So like, what constitutes progress in philosophical knowledge versus just writing opinions that just go in every direction randomly. So there's no settled conclusion on anything. And that's what he sees, right? So he's, as an outsider, because that's not his field, he sees that philosophy is this sort of contradictory chaos. No one's settling any questions. A lot of the articles in philosophy are just rambling. They're not very, they're not as logical as they should be. There's a lot of ignoring of science in philosophy that can be very frustrating for a scientist like Harris. And all that's true, right? But there is like legitimate good stuff in there, right? There are needles in the haystack for sure. And so I think what he's done is thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Whereas what I do is I want to be more laser specific as to what's actually good about philosophy, what's bad about philosophy, how do we tell the difference? And it's important to tell the difference because there's a lot of really good work in philosophy that we really should be paying attention to. And when it comes to like the article that I'm talking about today, my article for religions, that's an example of the kind of thing that good philosophy could be doing more of. And that I think Harris would appreciate if he were up on it. And I'm not alone. Like, there's others who've done things like this before me. I mean, I think Philippa Foot wrote some really good stuff on morality as a system of hypothetical imperatives. She's a big inspiration of mine. I'm building on her work. So there's a lot of like good stuff in philosophy, but it is buried under a bunch of bad stuff. And so I understand why Harris is kind of flippant and dismissive about philosophy. But he's, like I said, he's going too far.
Yeah. Okay, I really wanted to include as many topics as possible, so I will leave some Harris in peace for a while. I talked to you by mail, and I warned you that I would talk about politics. We know what's happening around the world. I don't know if you. I ask because many people are uncomfortable to talk about politics.
Yeah, I just did a show like yesterday or day before that came out with. What was it? Progressive Nation? I can't remember the name of the show, but it's, people will find it on my feeds, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Facebook. I'm on all those feeds, and you can check my wall. I just announced it this morning because it just went live. And I've talked to that channel about politics like a few times before. This isn't the only. I did it last year at the beginning of the Trump administration, and the host wanted to do another one of like, well, now it's been a year. What are you thinking about the Trump administration now? I don't hold back my thoughts on that. And I've written, people can go to my blog, which is, the one that's on the screen. And on the right-hand margin, there's a category drop-down menu, and politics is one of the categories. So if you want to see the kinds of stuff that I've written in politics, I've also done like social, society and culture stuff, and how philosophy overlaps a lot of different things. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that people might not know that I've written about. They can check out there. But yeah, what are your questions today?
My question is, your model seems to predict that you are. I mean, maybe I got it wrong, but it seems to me that your models predict that a rational society, if you have a rational society, will become better and better and more moral and more moral. You give the example of the vote of women. Women now have a vote because before you had bad information about women, that they were so emotional and so on and so on. Right. But now we are come back. It seems maybe it's just a feeling. It's feeling that you are come back to the past. Donald Trump, I know that not everyone support
Yeah.
Donald Trump in USA. He's like he's already attacked 10, at least 10, almost 10 country. He already attacked, they
Yeah.
initiated some war. It seems like you are coming back. So
Yeah.
you are
No,
evolving morality. How come
we
you
are
are come back
absolutely
in past?
backsliding. Yeah. And yeah, and this is a good question. Like, this is what I was asked before. Is like, why are we sucking at this so badly right now? And I do think, like, there's a lot of explanations. One is I'm talking about the United States. Our education system is in huge decline, and largely on purpose. So I think there was a decision made somewhere on the end of the 70s and the early 80s that education needed to be dumbed down because dumb voters were easier to manipulate. And so, and I think that was a concerted decision to sort of kill education or to starve it, or to get rid of or prevent real critical thinking courses, to water down real civics courses, to basically make voters that are just dumb, and you could easily manipulate them with your media. At the same time, you get like the end of the 80s and the early 90s, you have conservative media starting to use deliberate disinformation tactics that were learned. Like, we know this, you can check. They learned this stuff from the tobacco industry and the oil industry. And we know this because of court cases that revealed all of the sort of secret shit that they were doing in terms of manipulating the public through creating deliberate disinformation and using tactics like simply asserting things over and over again and never admitting that they're wrong, and therefore being immune to debunking, right? And so, and then appealing to emotion. So United States, I don't know if you're aware, is a super racist country. We have a lot of racist people. So that's the perfect thing to attack, to get people angry over that so that they ignore everything that actually matters.
Even the case of Obama, they compare Obama with the monkey, like in the video.
Yeah, like just recently, yeah. I
mean, it's crazy.
I don't remember, like, when Obama was running, like, Trump was already he was one trying to argue that he was born in, Kenya or whatever, and it was like, no, his birth certificate is fake. Like, he was pulling that stuff back then. Like, that was a long time ago. And a lot of people fell for it. More people fall for it now, I think, because the disinformation program has been so successful. Especially because of the internet. So I think this is partially a product of the internet, is that there's so much false information, and it takes so much work to figure out what is correct information, that most people check out. Like, they just don't even bother. It's like, it's too much work to figure out what's true. And so they just rely on their feelings. I'm just going to decide based on how I feel. But of course, when you do that, you're activating all the biases and inherent biases and bigotry, because that's what your feeling is. It's all of the sort of natural biases come out rather than being reasonable. So we've created a society that has decided that it is not worth the bother of being rational and informed, and that it's better to not be rational and informed. And if anybody says otherwise to you, you get angry at them. That's the society we've created. Obviously not everybody, right? So, like, I'd say about 40% of America is rational, informed, and progressive. And 40% is lost to the devil. Like, there's no getting them back. They're just totally delusional. And then you have like 20% in the middle that are kind of just like, chickens with their head cut off.
Floating out.
Yeah, deer in headlights. Like, they're just lost. They don't know what to do because no one gave them any skills. Like, their schooling did not prepare them for this. And so they don't know what to do. And so those are the ones that are the easily manipulated in the middle with silly distractions and stuff like that. And that's kind of like why the Trump administration uses the explicit flood the zone strategy. This is Steve Bannon described this strategy before the administration came in. And they said, just do a million illegal things all the time. And so they'll not be able to keep track of them all, right? Like, everything, a bunch of stuff will get through. They can't focus on every single thing you do. And that's defined his administration this year. It's just that he's so incompetent that all the things he does are so terribly done, even by his own criminal metrics, right? Like, so, like, even if you're like a Machiavellian and you say, like, okay, we're gonna do all these criminal things, he's bad at that. Even, like, he's bad at succeeding in any criminal enterprise. And so so it's just kind of, and then nobody's doing anything about it. This is the thing that I think is what freaks out most people around the world, is that the American Congress is doing nothing. Like, Trump has committed so many crimes like literally thousands of crimes if you count all of the contempts of court and illegal appointments and all the little things he's done. But he's also committed war crimes, and I'm not even talking about Iran yet. I'm talking like that also is a war crime. Tons of like high crimes and misdemeanors all over the place. Like he should have been impeached 1,000 times by now, but Congress won't do it. And so I feel like at this point we're looking at a completely corrupt government. That we and so it's really going to come down to 2026 this year. So November, our next election is going to decide what direction our country takes, whether it becomes a completely corrupt, essentially an anarcho-criminal syndicate state, or if we're going to go back to what we were like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, which also wasn't great. Like there was still progress to be made even from then, but the Obama, like there's a lot of things I could criticize about the Obama administration, and not just like I don't agree with everything Obama did, but although I think he was the best president that has served in my lifetime, but also all the things that the opposition did to block every good thing that he was trying to do. That there's a lot to criticize about the 2008, everything after that. 2008 to 2016, a lot to criticize about that, but that was a wildly more rational government than we are in right now. Like it's night and day. Like it's not even like an incidental difference. It's like a catastrophically huge difference, and it does leave me worried about the future of my country.
Perfect. Because you are going to the end, I would like to ask. You told me by mail that your model. When I said I would ask something about Trump, you told me that your model it will be out. It will be out of the
Yeah.
let's say scope, and I was wondering because as you described, what happened is irrational. People are biased. People has a bad education. They have a situation which they are not prepared, so they are acting on bad information, on bad
That's right.
behavior, on bias. So it seems that your model is predicting. So USA is becoming less moral.
Yeah, less moral and worse. So like think in terms of people's happiness. So like we have more deaths, more loss, more criminality, economically worse. Like everything's going badly economically. It's just by every metric that you could decide as to what constitutes the good life, everything is worse because of this. So that if people were paying it, like actually reasoning this out and saying, okay, obviously this is a completely incorrect way to run a country. We should not be supporting the Republicans. We should not be supporting Trump. We need to replace them all, right? And that, that would require like being informed. And this is one of the things we've noticed is there have been studies showing that we have a lot of voters, like millions of voters, who never watch or read the news. So that they literally don't know anything. Like they don't follow the news at all. They have no idea what's going on. And those are the ones who vote their emotions and waffle either direction at random based on how they feel. So that's like that loss of information, which is huge. The disconnect from information. You can't get to the moral truth without information. And then the lack of reasoning, like the non-rational, fallacious reasoning. So fixing those things is not easy. I don't know how to do it at scale, population-wide. Like this, all the things we would need to do are blocked by the very people who want it this way, which is basically the political and economic elite who want it this way. They want stupid people. So how do we fix it? I don't know. I have no idea. My hope is that we have a regime change in November. I should remind myself it's less than a year away now. And hope that pushes us back in the correct. I don't think it'll be utopia. We're not going to fix everything overnight. But the hope is that we'll stop the criminality and kind of go back to a more rational path of progress. That's my hope. I'm very cynical at this point because of all I've seen up to now. But anyway, that's my thinking.
I have been studying, and I know that Donald Trump is strongly supported by not only but mainly by white Christian.
Yeah.
So, do you believe that? Do you believe that this because George Bush was the same? George Bush, some Harris
Yeah.
always talk about George Bush. George Bush, he said that he talked to God every day. People would
Yeah.
be very happy to hear that. Now
Yeah.
Trump is the same. Trump has a kind of a mad pastor, mad Christian. They think they are
Yeah. It was just
persecuted.
strange because he's so unchristian. He's like the Antichrist in every model way. Like he's the opposite of everything that a Christian is supposed to represent. So yeah, it's kind of like the ultimate culmination of Christian nationalism. It's hypocrisy, right? Like you don't believe in anything Jesus said, like nothing. Like you're doing the exact opposite. I have an article on my site that I published before all of this called "Dear Christian, you're probably worshiping the Antichrist," where I go through all the teachings of Jesus and show that Christian teachings are the opposite, like literally opposite. You go down item by item by item. They're the opposite.
And you know
what is the opposite of Christ? It's Antichrist, right? That's what the word Antichrist means. It means the opposite of Christ. So Christians are worshiping the Antichrist in America. Anyway, I did a debate with a Christian nationalist just several months ago, last November. And him and his wife were seriously arguing for disenfranchising women. In other words, taking the vote away from women. Even his wife was arguing this. So she wants, take my vote away. I'm arguing for all women to have their vote taken away. Like no one would get away with saying that publicly 10 years ago, but now you can say it out loud. I don't think it has any chance of happening. I think they believe that it can happen and that they're winning. They're having so much winning right now that they might be able to do it. They won't. They'll do a lot of other damage, but that's one thing they won't achieve. But it does show that people are so steered off of reality, like they're so outside the bounds of rationality and knowledge, that they actually think that's a good idea, and are willing to say it out loud. Like they know they know they can get away with actually saying it. And you're right. So that illustrates what you're talking about. How I feel like America was going up and then it kind of slid back, and we've got to like get control of the train again and keep pushing it up or something. It's like or you think of it as an airplane. I've been watching a lot of Pilot Debrief, which is a great YouTube channel about how planes crash and how do you keep the plane going up without it stalling and falling. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. We're sort of falling back. We might crash. Who knows? And then there's all the economic stuff. We could go a while on all the economic crashes that are likely to happen this year or next. Equities market, AI, so much stuff is going to like tank right into the sea. It's going to be bad, but that's a whole other story, I think.
Yes. We want to go to the end. I just to close this topic and you can close the live. So your model is based. I read your paper. I was sadly the time is not enough to talk more, but I was a little bit concerned about how much you rely on rational agent. Are your model about rational agent? That the rational agent they have a goal, then they have a goal. They are going to be moral,
Right?
Then you have hypothetical, imperative, and so on. But just to close, in your model, do you consider religion as a rationality component or no?
Yeah, so Chris, that depends on how you define religion. So, like, what are you talking about there?
Religion is not like Buddhism. I'm not talking about Buddhism. I'm talking about the theist religion, like Christianity.
Yeah, okay,
Islam,
yeah. If we're picking something, yeah. So I would think I did an article on this called "What's the Harm." People could go check that out, where I talk about not just conservative Christians, which are easy to show that they have bad ideas and stuff, but also like liberal Christians who, like, I agree with a lot of the things that they preach and do. Even that is bad, just not as bad, because it's still built on false information, right? So there is no God. So if you're basing anything on the assumption that there's a God, you're already in a disinformation sphere. You're already like have bad data the moment. So you can't build any true system off of something that has been spoiled with false information like that. So you've got to purge all the false information, or be willing to. The other thing is like what it takes to continue believing that false information in the face of all the correct information out there, because there's a lot of like, it's easy to find out what's true or false if you take the effort, especially in the religion versus atheism debate. that the kind of fallacious mindset, the sort of epistemology, the theory of knowledge, the way you decide what to believe, the system that you use to decide what to believe, has to be broken to even allow you to believe in a thing like God. So even though it's not just that the God belief itself is false, it's that the system of knowledge that you're using, the way of knowing that you're using to get to that, is defective, and consequently those defects can lead to other false beliefs that might not even be related to God, but it's the same kind of failure mode, the same kind of fallacies that could lead to all kinds of false beliefs, and some of those could end up being harmful. And certainly you're not going to make progress that way. If you want to know what is the moral truth, you've got to purge fallacies and fallacious thinking and gather all the correct information and purge all the false information. So I think religion will always be in the way of correct scientific knowledge of moral truth. It's just that it varies in how much it's in the way. So like some versions of religion are way worse than others. But I do think ultimately religion has to be gotten rid of. But the only way to get rid of it really is that people have to realize that it is false and that it's getting in the way, and come up with something that replaces all the things they want to keep, right? So like there's community help, community participation, a sense of meaning, like the way that you can appreciate life. There's a lot of things about religion that you can pull out and are sustainable and defendable without appeal to the supernatural. And I do think it's worth doing that. I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do think there's valuable things in religions that we can salvage and build on scientifically that are not being like Vulcan rational, but are just like enjoying life, right? In a rational way, but nonetheless, there's a lot about our experience and stuff that it doesn't have to be rational. It just has to not be irrational, right? And there's a difference between non-rational and irrational, right? So you can just be in awe of a painting, and that's totally fine. Like that's one of the things that we can gain value out of life from. But as long as you're doing it in a way that doesn't hurt yourself or anybody, that's what life is for, right? Like that's what's worth living, is to have those experiences. So it's not like when I say rationality, I don't mean that we need to become emotionless. What I mean is that we need to organize our beliefs in a rational way so that we can go through enjoying life with all the range of emotions that we have. And that doesn't have to be the same for everybody. Everybody has their own personal things that they like about life and ways that they want to direct their life and so forth. That's all fine and is defensible on my system. I talk about in my article, like people can have different regimes of how they're going to live their life, but there is a common morality, and that's the common morality that we're talking about has to be organized rationally. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yes, it does.
Yeah. So that would be my reply to that. And I do have articles on the meaning of life, so that's in my category list for people who want to check that out too.
So before you close, one last question that you close. How come a historian end up studying mathematics, like Bayesian theory, game theory? Like I mean, I like it, but it's not. I believe it's not normal.
It is not. In fact, my latest book, The Obsolete Paradigm of a Historical Jesus, I have a whole chapter on this, how historians hate math, they're terrified of math, but need it because what they're doing is mathematical. They just don't recognize that what they're doing in history, all of it is mathematical ultimately. Now, it was super valuable for me to have both backgrounds because I feel like people who have one background or the other don't understand what it's like on the other side of the fence. And so when I went through high school, I was grooming myself to go into particle physics. That was and theoretical physics. That was my thing. For a brief time, I was thinking of going through the Navy and the nuclear program to work my way to college in that. I burned out on academics and became kind of like a Taoist garden worker for a while, construction worker and stuff. Because I couldn't handle, I just got sick of the academia, basically. It just wasn't satisfying me. So I did that for a while, and then I got hungry for knowledge again. And what I did is I eventually went into the Coast Guard for a variety of other reasons. and I specialized in sonar. So I actually ended up getting 12 units of electronics engineering education. That's 12 official college units through the 1 year or nearly 1 year program in San Diego, which was very math heavy, very science heavy and stuff. And so I did all that, and then I applied that, like I actually served at sea and applied that knowledge and so on. So I was already had that background. You know, for in high school, I'd taken calculus, like I'd gotten not that far. And then after the Coast Guard, I didn't know what to do. So I took a lot of other things in college to try and work my way to some sort of major. And that's when I took statistics. And so I kept my science and math background pretty strong. But I fell in love with history. And so that's what I went to do to finish my 4-year degree and then eventually my PhD and so on. But even then, I picked math science as my history subject. So I was doing history of math and science and religion and philosophy in the early Roman Empire. And that was so I was plugged in, crossing both worlds the whole time through. And then all the way through that, because of in the Coast Guard, I had a kind of revelatory experience where I realized like I needed to figure out what was true about the world. So when I transitioned from being a devout Taoist, because I was actually a Taoist I was never a devout Christian. I was a devout Taoist from my high school years on, but I kind of lost faith in that. And you know, someone tried to convince me to be a Christian, and I realized that was completely bogus. But then that led me to realize like, well, then what is true, right? And so that led down my quest to spend a lot of like all the time that a devout person would spend on their religion, I was spending on philosophy, doing real philosophy. And then eventually I started publishing in philosophy early, like my first article was 1997, I think. And then kept going from there and then to do good philosophy, I had to keep up on the sciences, so all the different sciences from psychology to physics, etc. And so that's what made it possible for me to be receptive to Bayesian reasoning when there was a time when people were arguing, there's other people arguing that historians should be Bayesian, and I was against it and arguing with them. And there was a moment when I had this sort of realization that I was wrong, right? I was like, wait a minute. No, they're right. Oh my God, Bayes' theorem is brilliant. It's the solution to everything. And, you know, I had that sort of epiphany, that eureka moment. And then I deep dived that to try and figure out, how do I apply that to history? How do I build that out? And that led to my book, Proving History, which is about that. And then I worked on different ways to make that more intelligible or easier for historians to grasp, because they're so scared of math. You got to make it as simple as possible. And so I've been doing that ever since. And so that's how I ended up this sort of dual life, where I have peer-reviewed real academic work and a lot of like personal popular work in philosophy and in history. And so that's how I ended up being both. But I find that they both inform me in like, I am a better philosopher because I'm a historian, and I'm a better historian because I'm a philosopher, and I'm better at both because of my math science background. And so I think that's basically the story of me in broad
Yes.
outline.
I was surprised the first time I saw you speaking. I was surprised that I could understand what you were saying. Like I could feel that, I could hear what you were saying. So later I understood this guy is like a mathematician in his head, because the way you
Yeah.
speak was like I could understand. I could feel that the way you approach. You didn't use any mathematics yet. I don't know if you were still like gaining attraction, but the way you think was like a mathematician already.
Yeah. I've been influenced by all different modes of it. So like how I think, I think the merger of science, history, and philosophy and math, all those four things together, gets me thinking in a much more disciplined, analytical way. And that's what results in the way I organize my talks most of the time. And you know, people can find on the internet, like I have a zillion,
Yes,
I've
lot
been
of
on a
them.
million YouTube shows. So yeah,
Yes, I
folks can find.
suggest did Jesus exist? I think your approach was like very easy to understand,
Yeah. Okay,
very.
good. Yeah, good.
I totally recommend it. So, Kerry, thanks a lot for attention. Thanks a lot for being for free. If someone wants to book
No,
you,
I'm glad to have done it. I hope that was useful for your audience and such too.
totally.
So
And also for my
yeah.
podcast, because I like to use as an input material. So if
Yeah.
someone wants to hire Dr. Kerry, he's available on the website. It's on the description of the video. It to be a treat to your audience. It to be something very. He's a polemic guy, but in the good sense because he has content. Yeah, you being a good audience for you. So I will close the live, but don't close the window because I want to say goodbye to you in private. So see you later, and everyone. And you please wait. I'm going to